Welcome to the Sorcery Podcast, your sacred space to delve into spiritual tools, topics, and practices that will illuminate your path of soul remembering and healing. I'm your host, Lígia Costa, a soul guide, alchemist, soul writing coach, and the creator of the T.R.U.S.T Pathway. I'm deeply grateful to have you here with me. Together, we will embark on a profound exploration of self-discovery and healing, unlocking the secrets that lie within. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sorcery Podcast. And I'm so very excited today to talk about this theme because it's something that I talk about all the time and is one of the spiritual practices and healing practices that I use with myself, with my clients, that I always recommend, that I always talk about. Yet I still feel there are so many misconceptions around it. And that is about shadow work. There are so many people that still fear or hide away from it because I don't think they are educated enough to understand what shadow work really is. So, many people resist. And I see this because I know human beings do this because it's just a natural response as a human being, right? Is that we resist recognizing and relating to our own shadows. And our shadows is nothing bad, right? It's nothing bad. It's just aspects of ourselves, of our personalities that for some reason we were conditioned to believe that they are wrong. And so because of that, we resist exploring our shadows. Because we fear knowing the dark parts of ourselves. There is this very much connection between shadow being a dark part of ourselves. Maybe because of the name. Maybe the name doesn't help, right? Shadow, we know, is a dark thing. So it's a dark silhouette that if we are outside in the sun, we see our shadow on the floor. We don't see it as a wrong thing, right? But for some reason, there is this connection with the dark side of our nature because it's a shadow. And as humans, it's in our nature to have this survival need to be loved and to be accepted. And throughout history, we witness that. We witness, in order to be safe and accepted by society, we needed to behave and to be in a certain way. Especially us women, right? If we go and look back to the hunter-gatherers, in order to be safe and to survive, we couldn't be alone, right? We had to be part of a community. We had to be a part of the tribe. And as women, our roles back then weren't so much of hunting and fighting and killing for food, was more the creation, was more the agriculture, was more the creation of the children, was more the cooking, more the then when they start sewing clothes and things like that. That was the women's job. And then throughout history and for many, many centuries, women couldn't have their own thinking. We couldn't have our own thinking and our own opinions and make our own decisions without being labeled as being a rebel or being disobedient, right? We couldn't be sensual without being labeled as a prostitute or being dirty or a whore. We couldn't show we were intelligent and wise, especially in the areas of philosophy, medicine, midwifery, and apothecary, without being labeled as witches. And that is in history. It's on all history books. You read that over and over. You don't read that was the patriarchy that did all of it, but you can read it right? So we hid parts of ourselves. We hid our sensuality. We hid our opinionated thinking. We hid our intelligence and how clever we were, or this yearning to be curious and read about things and find things. We hid all of that so that we could survive and be safe. And so through generations of old programming and collective trauma, we learned that it's safer for us to hide, to disown, to reject, to dismiss the parts of us that society perceives to be dark, to be unaccepted, to be too much, to be hated, to be feared. Because when people don't understand, they fear things. And I recently watched a movie. The name of the movie is Agora. I don't know if you ever watched it. But it's basically about the true story. Even though not all facts in the movie are factual correct, we know that in Hollywood, they obviously, for the purpose of being a movie, they have to create narratives that are not factual correct. But the intention of the truth is there. So this movie is about Hypatia. Hypatia was a philosopher and an astronomer. If I'm not mistaken, she was the first woman to be a philosopher and astronomer. She was also a mathematician, and she lived in the old Alexandria in Egypt. She was lucky enough because her father was a philosopher as well and someone in the hierarchy of the society. She was very lucky to grow up in that environment, which also obviously fed her curiosity about philosophy and mathematics and astronomy. And she grew up to be a teacher and to teach the elites of the time, which were all men, by the way, about all these themes, about philosophy, astronomy, and all of the things. And unfortunately, I feel like she was too advanced for that time. If she was born in our society now, she would be famous and respected, which she was. Actually, she was famous and respected. We're talking about a time, and this was around 400 CE, where women didn't have posts like hers. They weren't teachers, they weren't philosophers or mathematicians or respected in society so much that she was involved in the politics as well. And it was also a time where Christianity was rising and they were abolishing the Jews and the pagans, and she was a pagan. Her beliefs were in the stars, in the astronomy, in the philosophy. That's where her beliefs were. And eventually, Christianity stopped ruling Egypt and they killed a lot of Jews and pagans. A lot of Jews and pagans actually converted to Christianity because, again, that need to feel safe, right, and to survive. So they converted not because it was their religion belief, but because they needed to feel safe and survive. But Hypatia, she didn't want that. She didn't converted, and unfortunately she was accused of witchcraft, of being a witch. And it goes back to what I was saying, she was labeled as a witch because she was very intelligent in this area of astronomy and philosophy and mathematics. And those that didn't understand any of it, they saw it as a danger. And so at that time, when patriarchy saw these things as danger because they didn't understand it, it was easier to label it as witchcraft and then kill in name of getting rid of the witches. And that's unfortunately was her destiny. She was killed. I think she was an elderly. She could have been between 45 and 60 when she was killed by the Christians in a horrible death, by the way. If you read about it, was quite harsh. Because she didn't hide away who she was to be accepted, her destiny was that. But for the majority of people, they wouldn't stand up for it. And so we have this very collective trauma around, hiding who we are and even rejecting the parts of ourselves that society keeps telling us or kept telling us for centuries and centuries that are not acceptable, that are wrong, that are danger. And what this cause is that in today's world, we are under this pressure to avoid our shadows. And we believe that by avoiding our shadows, we live with ease, we live with comfort, we live in flow, and that we're going to achieve our comfort and happiness that way. And we tend to judge our lives based on whether we are happy and comfortable, right? So if we are happy and comfortable, everything is good. But the problem is when we don't feel happy and comfortable. But we believe that by avoiding our shadows, that's how we're going to accomplish that. It's easier, right? It's easier that way than judging our lives in terms of how much we are growing, how much we are deepening and challenging ourselves. Because for that, you have to be willing to look into the shadows. And the majority of people don't want that. And not only that, this, is a personal way of looking at things, but as a collective, we are increasingly becoming strangers to the dark, to the unseen, to the uncomfortable parts of our personalities. And because we are doing that, because we are becoming strangers to what is uncomfortable, what we tend to do is we judge people so much. We are so judgmental without even realizing that what we are judging in other people is what we see in them that we have within us. And because we reject it in us, we judge in others. And this is mind-blowing when we realize these things. We are rejecting the transformation. We are rejecting the expansion, the potential for growth. We sabotage our best opportunities to know ourselves on a deeper level because we keep rejecting the uncomfortable. What is uncomfortable to look at in terms of our personalities. And as I mentioned in a previous episode, last week's episode about embarking on a soul-searching journey, I truly believe that our gift in this lifetime is to become who we truly are at a soul level. But we cannot achieve that if we are not willing to face the shadow within, because we are duality. Our soul is duality. It's made of the light aspects of ourselves and the darker aspects of ourselves, our shadows. And if we are not willing to look at the darker side, we cannot remember who we are at the soul level and embody who we are at the soul level wholeheartedly. We can't just pick and choose what we want to. We all have that duality within us. And so I think the first step in order to do that is really to demystify and bring collective awareness that our shadows, that dark side of our soul, is nothing to be feared or hidden away. Rather, is to be embraced. So let's just start demystifying that right now. What is the shadow? I'm going to tell you what is the shadow. So let's start this collective movement of bringing this awareness that the shadows are nothing to be feared. So the shadow is basically the deep and unseen parts of our personalities. And the shadow is also an archetype. And this goes back to Carl Jung, the master of the archetypes, the master of the unconscious mind. He came up with many archetypes, and the shadow is one of them. It's the archetype of the hidden, unwanted, negative, dark side of our personalities, which, due to our life experiences and due to cultural and societal conditioning, we have deemed unfit. But if you think about it, to embody kindness, we repress our cruelty, right? To embody generosity, we repress greed. To embody acceptance, we repress judgment. And why is that? Because light creates darkness. There is no light without darkness, or there is no darkness without light. It's a universal balance. It's the yin and the yang. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning of this episode about when we are outside in the sun and we see our shadows reflected on the ground. The only reason you can see the shadow is because the sun is shining on you. It's the light of the sun. Because when it's cloudy, you can't see your shadows, right? That is just an analogy. And as I also said before, the shadow first starts revealing itself in projection. It is put outside of ourselves onto others. It's what we see in others that we don't accept, that we feel uncomfortable, that we reject. Because projecting our shadows to others enables us to reject unpleasant parts of ourselves to avoid feeling that discomfort and that anxiety by pointing out these qualities in others. So you feel or you believe that you are criticizing, judging, rejecting, or pointing out things in other people that you feel you don't like, right? That you feel don't align with you. But the truth is, those things are the exact same things are in you. But it's easier to point fingers to others than to ourselves. It's easier to say, I don't like that person being a show-off. It's easier to say that, for example, this is an example, than to look in the mirror and say, well, there is an aspect of myself that likes to be a show-off, but I've been repressing that, right? Anything we can't accept in others is something that we can't accept in ourselves. And when that is unconscious, we have no control over our shadows. We keep on projecting it impulsively. We keep on reacting to other people's behaviors without giving it a thought, right? We just do it naturally because we don't have awareness of it. And that's why it's so important to study about this, to have awareness about this, to embrace our shadows so that we can become conscious of what really is triggering us in other people's behaviors and personalities. Because then we can see it as our own. So many times we are triggered by what other people do or, their behaviors, their personalities even. They are just being themselves and sometimes we feel triggered by it. And we put the blame on that people without seeing that what we are doing is basically projecting onto others. We are basically rejecting and repulsing in ourselves those shadows. We can only grow when we are able to acknowledge the darker parts of our personalities. And understanding this is so important so that we can find the light within. But to find the light within, we also need to find the darkness. So you might be asking by now, how do I become conscious about my shadows? And that's easy, I would say. Once I start doing this work, I found it easy. So, and this is where shadow work comes in, right? Shadow work, it's about questioning rather than offloading what's uncomfortable. It's when we feel triggered by something someone did or even just the way they are as a person, and we feel like we've been triggered, rather than reacting to it, we question that. Why am I feeling triggered? Why is this behavior triggering me? Because when doing so, we use the shadow as an invitation to examine and know ourselves on a deeper level. We're inviting that shadow in to tell us what's within us. So instead of us projecting and reacting, we are questioning and inviting the shadow in so that we can know ourselves better. And shadow work begins with our own perspective, because you get to be open to believing that behind this instinctive part of yourself, there is gold to be discovered, to be embodied, to be utilized. It's all about perspective. If you see your shadow as being something bad and dark and wrong, you'll never be able to see what the shadow can actually teach you. But when you see it beyond those instinctive parts of yourself that you perceive to be wrong and dark, then you are able to see the gold that is underneath. So sit with yourself and practice honest reflection. And you can do that through meditation, through journaling, through analyzing your dreams, because all of these practices are ways of exploring, right? Are ways of just sitting down with your thoughts and your emotions, pausing, reflecting, and getting curious about what shadow qualities reside in you. Because when you can begin to consciously notice your shadows, you start noticing around you. You start to see it in others, to understand it in others. You start to understand other people's behaviors. And then it's not so triggering to you because you can see it for what it is. You can see that it's not what other people's behaviors are doing that is triggering you, but your own behaviors that you've been repressing. Now, I want to give you a bit further support on this. So there are 3 practices that can help you embrace your shadow. If this is something that you've been called to do, if this is something that you've heard before but you had all these misconceptions about, and now that you understand it more, you're curious about it, there's 3 practices that can help you with this discovery. So first of all is self-awareness. And self-awareness goes with any inner work that we do, right? It's start by noticing your own behavior, your own feelings, your thoughts, but without self-judgment. And this is really important. You've been judging yourself and been judging others all your life. You don't need that anymore. Shadow work requires you to look into all of these things without the lens of judgment. This practice can help you become more attuned, more calm, more clear, without immediately looking at yourself with, criticism or shame or guilt. We don't need any of it. So simply notice your emotions and enter into a dialogue with them, really. You can do that through journaling. You can talk to your emotions, explore it that way. And then you can integrate that through action. For example, think of someone that triggered you to the core, right? Really to the core. And that brought a lot of emotional responses or reactions to you. So instead of reacting instinctively, notice any strong emotional reactions. Describe the details. Describe the characteristics that most bother you in that person. What upsets you? What pushes you away? And then write and talk about it and express the feelings to yourself without filtering or refining it. Just be honest. Whatever comes to you, to your mind, just write it as is. The second practice you can do is to practice self-compassion. And I can't stress this enough. In all the inner healing and all the support I give in the healing journeys of my clients, and even here on the podcasts and videos and tutorials I give, I always talk about being kind to yourself because it's so important. It will be so hard to hold the discomfort of the shadow if we judge ourselves. We just won't go as far as confronting the monsters within if we hate ourselves for having them, right? We all have that dark side of ourselves. We all do. Again, we are duality. So when you are kind to yourself, you are able to accept it as part of who you are instead of hating it. Because if you do, if you hate that, if you really repel that, there is no way that you're going to be able to confront it and do this shadow work. And then it's just not that. It's the healing and self-growth that you are basically limiting yourself for having because you are hating yourself. And the third practice is to be really honest with yourself. And this is more important than going to a therapist or speaking to your coach or to your mentor or to your spiritual teacher and not being 100% honest and hiding some parts of the story because you are afraid or you are ashamed or you just don't want to be vulnerable. If you can't be honest with yourself, there isn't much help there. And I'm sorry to say this. If you can't be completely honest with yourself, who will you be honest with? You need to admit and notice when you place criticism and hard judgments on others. And I know it's hard to admit this, and I know it's hard to see it. You don't have to tell anyone about this, but at least tell yourself the truth. Because to come to terms with the disowned parts of your own personality, you need to be honest. So you can really notice what's really going on. So you can really heal. If you don't have honesty with yourself, if you don't tell the truth to yourself, again, you're blocking. You can't see what's going on, so you can't heal it. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. Now, just to finish this episode, it's really important that you remember that the integration phase is the hardest, because it is the stage that you will feel the most uncomfortable, that will feel the most unfamiliar, the off-killer, if you want to say it. When things start landing and you start processing the truth and the new perspective and seeing things for what they are, and you are processing it, you are integrating it, that's the hardest part, because we'll feel uncomfortable. No one wants to admit what we deem to be bad parts. Shadow is not being bad part of ourselves. But on the flip side, by embodying, accepting, seeing and leaving the shadow, you are rewarded with more wholeness, because you are inviting that part of yourself to the table. You are inviting not just the light aspects, but also the darkest aspects. And that is the whole soul of you, because you are duality. You are able to step into your full authentic self. And for that, you must risk facing the parts of yourself that provoke guilt, that provoke shame, and even disgust. Because only then you can see the brightness within the dark, the gold behind what is hidden. Okay? Before I love you and leave you, I'll pull a card from the T.R.U.S.T Journaling Deck. And the card that I pulled is from the Unravel suite. And the soul inquiry is, where in life am I experiencing resistance? Where in life am I experiencing resistance? And the affirmation is, I surrender all expectations. And this is such a beautiful soul inquiry for this episode, because you might be resisting looking into your shadows. So what are the shadow parts of you? What are the shadow aspects of you that you are resisting looking at? So maybe journal on this. That might help you to unravel what's beneath the projections and the frustration and the feelings that you might be feeling. Actually, the T.R.U.S.T Journaling Deck is an amazing tool to do shadow work. It's one of the tools that I use with my clients, and I have so many good testimonials about it, because it goes through this 5-stage of soul healing journey. And obviously shadow work is incorporated in it. I have a little stock of the physical deck on my website, www.liciacosta.co.uk, but I also have this deck available digitally on the Deckable app. And you can now try it for free for 3 days and see how you get on with it. And it's very easy. I'll put all the instructions and all the links in the show notes, but it's very easy. You basically just download the Deckable app first, either in your Google Play or App Store. Then you create your account if you don't have one already. And then search for the T.R.U.S.T Journaling Deck, or you click on the link that I'll provide in the show notes. And then you just use one of the trial credits that you automatically have in your account. And you can trial the deck, see how it goes. The app is amazing because you can do different shuffles and different spreads within the app. And you can also journal within the app. There is that tool there that is really cool, because you get the soul inquiry from the deck. It's already like your soul guiding you to explore that more. And then you can instantly, start journaling about it on the app. And it's a great tool as well, because it's always on your pocket. So you have the app with you, you are out and about, you can use it, you don't have to wait You don't have to carry your deck with you all the time. But if you do prefer the physical deck, I have a small stock with me, so you can just go onto my website and purchase it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on social media or by email. I would love to hear your feedback about the episodes, if they are insightful for you and helpful for you. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening to the Sorcery Podcast and for holding space for this conversation. It is truly magical to be able to walk with you on this journey of soul healing and inner transformation. If you resonated with this episode and found it valuable, I would be grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes. Your feedback helps me reach more souls searching for guidance and healing. For more guidance and soul wisdom to support soul awakening women through the journey of alchemy, please visit my website www.ligiacosta.co.uk. Love and healing to all. See you on the next one.